Welcome to Virtual Check 2020. I'm Tyler Parker with Emporia State University's Web and Digital Strategies team, and I'm here to give you a tour of how to get around at this newly virtualized conference. The conference will take place over 2 days, Wednesday, May 20th, and Thursday, May 21st. So please remember to register if you haven't done so. On the first day, we're asking that you check in from a link at the Check 2020 website at esucheck2020.com. Since some of you may have registered way back when Check was an in-person event, we want to have an idea of how many were actually able to attend, which will help us gauge the effectiveness of a virtual event like this one. In most cases, we've made it really simple for you to watch and ask questions of our presenters. Almost all of the sessions will be broadcast on our YouTube channel called Keynote. You don't need to sign in or have any special software installed. To ask questions, we have a web-based forum for these sessions to submit questions, which will be relayed to the presenters by our moderators. If you'd like to attend one of the 6 Birds of a Feather sessions, then you'll need to pre-register to get the Zoom information. This will be your opportunity to interact within live Zoom room, and we're trying to limit the amount of places you have to register or sign up this year, but we also want to respect the privacy and security of all attendees when attending these type of public events. And remember, your one-stop shop is the Check 2020 website at esucheck2020.com. From here, you can access the schedule, get links to view sessions, access the forms to submit questions to presenters, and any other information related to the conference. If we can help with anything, we'll be on social media throughout the entire day. That's at CHECKCONF on Twitter, or you can ask questions via the form on the Check 2020 website. And if you get bored in between sessions, hop over to the place on our webpage that we're not so creatively calling Between Sessions. We've been working on Check for more than 6 months now, and we had planned videos, interactive exhibits, cool t-shirts, and an Olympic-themed evening event to keep you engaged and entertained when not learning in sessions and networking with colleagues. Unfortunately, most of that doesn't really work in a virtual world in the limited amount of time that we've had to put all of this together. But the Between Sessions page is what we are able to digitally share from those efforts, including the recognition of the 50th anniversary of the first meeting that became the Check Conference. To think that 5 decades ago, the computing departments of many of our institutions came together in the spirit of sharing and collaborating, and today, in the midst of a crisis and determination, have transformed that into a fully online virtual experience. It truly is a remarkable feat. On behalf of Emporia State, we are excited to have you join us, and we hope you have a great virtual Check conference. Welcome to Check 2020.
Good morning. My name is Melanie Jones, and I'm privileged to be the chair for the CHEC Planning Committee this year. I want to welcome all of you to CHEC 2020. This is a landmark year for CHEC for a couple of reasons. In 1970, regional directors of data processing centers at universities across Kansas formed the Computer Advisory Center. At their first meeting, there were 20 people attending. 2 short years later, in 1972, they officially changed their name to CHEC, which stands for the Conference of Higher Education Computing in Kansas. Meetings have continued every May since then, so this year we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of this group. Another reason this is a landmark year is, of course, because it's all virtual. I dare say attendees of CHEC 50 years ago would have a hard time imagining that conference format today. Not to mention the number attending. This year, there are over 300 registered attendees. Hosting the conference in this way has been challenging and maybe a little terrifying, but very exciting. Brian Osborne and our Web and Digital Strategies team has done an amazing job of pulling all of this together. We are indeed fortunate to have the opportunity and the technology to allow us to still gather and share information and ideas with our counterparts from across the state. This year, the CHEC Planning Committee received lots of great proposals submitted for presentation. Ordinarily, we select 18 presentations to fit the time and format of a typical face-to-face CHEC. Well, as you know, this year has been anything but typical. By going virtual, we threw out the book on time limitations and accepted all of the proposals that were submitted, resulting in 26 individual presentations this year. We also added 6 birds of a feather open forum conversations, plus a panel discussion with our CIOs. All in all, a really great lineup with loads of content and opportunities to interact with your colleagues, which ultimately is what CHEC is all about. Now, for a few reminders, please be sure to fill out the check-in form on the homepage of the CHEC website. This will help us to know who to send our survey to, who attended, and etc. Think of this as your check-in, pick up my name badge alternative. On the homepage, you will also see a questions button. We will be monitoring this throughout the conference if you have questions. You can also pose any questions or comments to our Twitter feed. We tried to arrange the presentations by topic in tracks so that you'll be able to attend topics of the most interest to you without overlapping. Rest assured, if you miss a session, all sessions will be recorded and archived on the CHEC YouTube channel after the conference is over. On the sessions page of the site, click on any of the scheduled sessions to get more information about it. Most sessions will have the opportunity to submit questions to the presenter for a live Q&A afterwards, including our keynote speaker who will take questions after her address. And some of the presenters have submitted documents as handouts. Look for them on the page for that session. We will try very hard to start all sessions promptly as they are scheduled. Please be patient if there are any technical difficulties that create delays. Check our website for any updates or information regarding scheduling delays or changes. One last thing that's different this year. Snacks, beverages, and lunch will be on your own. Above all, enjoy the conference, and again, on behalf of the CHEC Planning Committee and ESU, I wish to welcome you all to virtual CHEC 2020. I would now like to introduce Emporia State University CIO, Corey Faldine. Corey has been an enthusiastic participant in CHEC since 2002 and has been instrumental in all of the CHEC conferences we have been honored to host since that time. Good morning, Corey.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to the first ever virtual CHEC conference. As Mel just mentioned, my name is Corey Faldine, and I'm the Chief Information Officer here at Emporia State University. While I'm disappointed that we aren't hosting you all on the ESU campus, we're still very excited to be keeping the CHEC tradition alive and that you're able to join us virtually. I do want to take a minute to give special thanks to Melanie, to our region-wide CHEC Planning Committee, and to all the ESU staff who've been planning to make this event. These folks were already working 100 miles an hour to host a successful conference on campus, and they actually somehow kicked it into overdrive on incredibly short notice to make it virtual. To all of you, thank you. Melanie, thank you. We owe you a debt of gratitude for making this happen. What's amazing to me is that 2020 is already coming up on the halfway point, and just how much has already happened this year. Just about 3 months ago, everything we know was upended. Every single one of our organizations was impacted. But here's what I'm going to say about that. I genuinely believe that every one of our IT organizations rose to meet the challenge. Now, I'm not saying that things were perfectly smooth, that we haven't stumbled, had failures, or haven't had those if only we had done moments. But the one thing I keep hearing over and over again is how creative IT departments have been to help their students, faculty, staff, and their communities really leverage technology to keep people connected, to keep their operations going, and to do everything we can to find opportunities for folks in the most frustrating and chaotic of circumstances. I have seen some tremendous things that people across the state have done to make technology as inclusive and accessible as possible. Hotspots in rural areas, drive up and school bus Wi-Fi, getting devices in the hands of students and parents so that they don't have to share now that everyone's in the same house at the same time. I've seen us take giant leaps in finding ways to help with digital accessibility, helping develop hybrid courses, digitizing business processes, doing these things in days instead of in months. I've seen partnerships with cities and local healthcare providers, leveraging 3D printing to create PPE, building apps to assist with institutional contact tracing. Institutions have substantially shifted their infrastructures and services to support remote work and instruction, reimagining how we make traditionally face-to-face events effective in a virtual environment. What I've seen are IT departments and an educational community bending over backwards to help each other. It's impressive, it's humbling, and it reminds me why I work in IT. So I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but I did just hear someone say yesterday, moving forward, we all have a great opportunity to take a deep breath and look at what's changed, what's working, what's not working. Consider what we're doing and what we're providing for the best services to our organizations and really focus on those areas. With that in mind, I'm going to introduce our keynote. I've only known her now for a little under a year, but I'm so grateful to have her in the role that she's in, especially right now. Dr. D'Angela Burns-Wallace was appointed as the Secretary of the Kansas Department of Administration by Governor Laura Kelly in July 2019 and confirmed unanimously by the Kansas Senate in January. In addition to her role as Secretary, Dr. Burns-Wallace was named the Chief Information Technology Officer for the State of Kansas Executive Branch in August. Dr. Burns-Wallace is the first woman of color to serve in both of these leadership positions for the state of Kansas. Prior to Governor Kelly's appointment, Dr. Burns-Wallace served as the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies at the University of Kansas, and during her 15-year career in higher education, she has also served as the Assistant Vice Provost of Undergraduate Studies at the University of Missouri and the Assistant Dean in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at Stanford University. Dr. Burns-Wallace continues to hold faculty appointments at KU, MU, and the University of Southern California. During or before working in education, she served as a Foreign Services Officer with the U.S. Department of State. She served tours in China, South Africa, and Washington, D.C. Service continues to be a cornerstone of her journey. Dr. Burns-Wallace is currently on the Stanford University's Board of Directors, or Board of Governors, and has held board roles with numerous organizations, including the College Board and Heart of Missouri United Way, as well as serving on selection committees for Gates Millennium Scholars, Dell Foundation Scholars, and Rhodes, Marshall, and Fulbright Fellowships. Burns-Wallace earned a dual bachelor's degree in International Relations and African American Studies from Stanford University, a master's of Public Affairs from the Woodrow Wilson School of Public International Affairs at Princeton University, and a doctorate in education from the University of Pennsylvania. She's originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and is the proud mother of 11-year-old Xavier. I am so grateful that she is able to join us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Burns-Wallace.
Good morning. I hope everyone is doing well. As everyone has said this morning, this is not how we had planned to do this, but I am so excited to be here and to join you this morning. It's a little surreal to be able to talk to a lot of people, a lot of IT professionals, and I can't see you and I can't get the feel from you and the nods and the understanding that we like to have when we do a keynote. So I'm going to share a few things, and then my hope is that we'll have time that we can open it up to questions, because a little bit of dialogue is what we all need to keep things moving, to know where we are, to understand what's going on, and to take our conversations to the next level. First and foremost, thank you to Melanie and Corey and the rest of the planning committee for this invitation, for putting this together, to have the time to really take a step back and to be reflective, not just during this time, but at any time in our careers, is very important. It's how we continue to be those leaders. It's how we continue to be innovative in the ways that have been shared this morning. It is important. So I was excited to hear that the conference would continue to go on, that we just be a little bit more creative about how we delivered it. I remember when Corey first asked me if I would join for this conversation to be a keynote. And I said, okay, so tell me a little bit about the group and the conference, and tell me about what you would like for me to talk about. And what he wrote to me was, we would love to hear your vision on how technology fits into goals and the future of our state, and how important our IT role is in that vision. So, of course, this was back around late February, probably about February 26, 27. So I was like, okay, that's great. Perfectly. That's something we can lay out. And then about 2 weeks later, our world began to shift. In mid-March, as all of you know, things became a little bit more clearer as to what we were facing. And then over the next 8 weeks, we would learn more and more every single day, with every single conversation, with every single data point. And as we learned more, we actually had more questions. And in our space, in the work that we do in this IT space, it was very similar to other spaces. How are we going to do this? How are we going to provide support? They're going to look to us for stability, because we're talking about how do we continue to do what we currently do, but in a remote way. For state government, we draw down for about 2 weeks at the end of March. And that 2 week period of time for me was a critical ask. It was unprecedented, because when we drew down, we pretty much sent everyone home. Almost the entirety of state government was on admin leave for 2 weeks. But that 2 weeks allowed us to take a breath as individuals and as an organization. It allowed us to look at our plans and to look at how prepared and ready we were, to assess our gaps, and to begin to take action to fill those gaps. By April 6th, we were able to come back to work with almost 60% of our state government working remotely out the gate. Within about 3 more weeks, we had reached closer to 80%. And so for those that I would say are in a category that their role is able to telework, we have reached that level of close to 95% of those individuals teleworking now. We deployed over close to 1,500 laptops across both cabinet and non-cabinet agencies. We deployed hotspots and all the things that you've heard about. We set up, remote work, virtual desktop. We worked on moving our call centers. We did everything humanly possible to ensure that we could still deliver the services for our state, to help our agencies be able to continue in this time of crisis, that there was a little bit of calm and a little bit of certainty that was no question for our agencies, for our citizens. But that took a lot. I actually think as we stop and think about it, it took more than we thought. So what I want to share with you this morning, as we think about where we are now, as we think about the role of IT in our state, in our future, in our nation, I saw a quote that has really stuck with me during this time. And the quote said, "In the rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to." So today I'm going to challenge us to think about 3 main areas. First, who are we in this moment? How is this narrative going to flow? Secondly, what's next? And are we ready? And third, understanding, leveraging, and utilizing our most valuable asset. So let's start with who we are going to be in this moment. I want us to think about, in this IT space, a shift from crisis management to leading through a crisis. Over the last 8 months, 8 weeks, undoubtedly, many of you have managed the crisis. Corey gave great examples of the innovation that has happened around IT in so many places, the collaboration that has happened that really has helped us sustain a little bit of normal in this unprecedented time. But we've managed outputs, we've managed the response. We've thought about, how do we get back on course? How do we get people to a normal that they can do their work? How do we fix the obstacles that people are facing to access systems and to get to necessary information? How do we manage the present? And what I would say, what has been demonstrated is our IT industry, us as professionals, us as partners across the state, have stepped up to manage the crisis and to lend our support to the leaders and the directions that are needed. But I want to challenge us to begin to think now about how we move from managing the crisis to leading beyond the crisis. Where is that big picture, and how do we begin to chart that course? We need to begin to anticipate, what does next week, next month, next fall, and next year look like for our agencies? What are those possible scenarios? And most importantly, what have we learned to understand what those scenarios could be, should be, and need to be going forward? How do we begin to think about making some very tough decisions that, in the middle of the crisis, some of those decisions were made easier because we had to, or we needed to, or as an emergency? But some of those tough decisions that are on our horizon are some that some may not be willing to make as they feel the crisis has settled. But we're not settled. We need to think about, how do we lead long term? How do we move through and help our organizations think about charting this course? And in this, directing the narrative. The communication between IT and business is key and critical. And we know this on a day-to-day to get our work done, to understand the needs of those we support and the work that we do. But in this time, it's even more critical. We need to be a part of directing the narrative of how we've been able to successfully deliver so much in this time, how the role and the work that we do is key and critical to how we think about our future. We weren't just a technical solution for a moment. We must be integrated and woven into the planning for the future. We must be at the table and part of the narrative and not simply a fix in the moment. So, two, that leads us to thinking about readiness and what's next. A lot of times when I talk to students over the years, I still teach in a number of different environments at the graduate level and love it. And I'm always telling my students, my graduate students in higher ed, to be ready. And when I talk about being ready, I talk about this idea of readiness is about when preparation meets opportunity. Well, this crisis is an opportunity. And I'm sure you've heard someone say, you never let a good crisis go to waste. And in this moment, and I don't take it lightly, but it is an important moment to say this crisis has helped some of our partners truly understand the strength and the power and the leverage of IT, our resources, our teams, and our staffs into achieving a different business outcome. So as we look forward, we have to think about and use our lessons learned to understand where we need to go to help our organizations think about what's next. I can say in our own organizations for the state, in many pockets, we have changed hearts and minds in these 8 weeks about remote work and productivity and the effectiveness and the efficiencies. I have agencies that while we had a state remote work policy, would never engage it, would believe that they could not deliver their services accordingly. We've changed some of those hearts and minds. But we need to make sure, again, that we're taking the lessons learned and that we're pulling them through so that it's not a moment or a crisis response, but that it is, again, integrated into and interwoven into the future strategy. For us at the state, some of our lessons learned was that we could deploy and actually get our operations up and running in a matter of weeks. And if you had asked us that a few months ago, I don't know that anybody would have said we could have done that. So we have to trust the ability and the infrastructure that we actually have there. And now we want to push it more to understand what all we can do. Other lessons learned for us was that there were pockets and pieces of our systems that were truly ready for this, and that there were others that were not. But we did not have a good understanding of those differences. When we went to flip certain switches, we assumed we were all ready to go. And those gaps became readily apparent very quickly. And those gaps are the areas that we have to figure out, how do we feel and how do we turn those as we move forward? Everything's from virtual desktop to even soft phone deployment, some things that, our firewalls, our VPN loads, some of those things we knew were there, they were in place, they were ready to go. But we realized we actually had never tested the load or the full capability. So in those early days, we were very nervous, but it worked and it held. And a lot of that I pushed back into my team and said, because you did prepare, you may not have realized you were preparing for this crisis, but we did have the foundation. So also trusting what we had there. But those lessons learned and taking a moment to truly debrief this first phase, because it's not over. Our crisis, we are still in the middle of it. It is going to evolve. We don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months or a year. But through this phase, for many of us, we've hit at least a new normal steady state. So I push us back into the quote to say, as we build our new normal, use some time to consider which parts are not worth rushing back to, which pieces have truly brought gains to our organizations, to our staff, and which pieces have shown us that the way we have done things from years may not be the best way forward. And I challenge us in this lessons learned, not to forget the things that didn't work, not to forget the failures, not to forget the gaps, not to sugarcoat it, because in those failures are the best lessons learned of how and what we need to do better as we prepare for that next step. I'm going to round us out by talking about and thinking about our most valuable asset. As an IT group of professionals that support some of the most important and critical functions in our state, across state government and higher education, the most valuable asset that we have is you. And what I will challenge us to do as we think about our new normal is we need to make sure that we are assessing our own needs and the needs of those that we lead. I go back to the conversation that we had at the state when we were going through that drawdown period. And even some of the conversation we're having now as various agencies are thinking about what does their reopening plan look like? What does the fall look like? I have stopped every secretary, every cabinet level secretary and said to them, some of this is about taking a breath. So, as much as it is about we need to make sure we have everything in place, we need to have time to prepare, we need to have time to deploy. When we took the 2 weeks where we drew down the government, that was those last 2 weeks of March, where the realities that schools were going to move to a virtual environment for the rest of the year had just happened. That many people were learning that they were going to be working remotely, that people were beginning to understand what this crisis was, what this virus was, and the vulnerabilities and the sensitivities. And the numbers were beginning to skyrocket across the state, even though we hadn't quite seen them in Kansas as of yet. In that 2 week period of time, there was so much as individuals we needed to digest. As Corey mentioned in my intro, I have an 11-year-old son, Xavier. He just finished up 5th grade. And I just say just finished. Today is field day and tomorrow is the last day of school. And when I tell you these last 8 weeks have been some of the most challenging, and it had nothing to do with work, trying to maintain and manage and do the work that we needed to do for the state, to support both of my agencies, all of that compared trying to help my 5th grader with homeschooling and his math. And I've seen many videos on YouTube and Facebook and things like that. But there are things that are real. Like, I am not a math teacher, right? I enjoy math, but I'm not a math teacher. There are a relationship that me and my son have, and being that teacher and trying to lead him through that is one in which it becomes a challenge. And it's been stressful and it's been hard. And during that 2 week period of time, we had to get ourselves ready and set up our spaces and our offices and how we were going to live and how we were going to work and what our flow was going to be. And it's changed across those 8 weeks. And there were days that I couldn't get on my Zoom meetings, and there were days I couldn't get him on his either. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm a smart person. You heard my bio. I've been to school forever. I should be able to get my child onto Zoom meetings. And we missed 3 one day in a row. And I just stopped, and I stopped my meetings. And I recently got Disney Plus and we had a movie night and we made brownies. And I didn't answer another email, and we didn't worry about what he missed that day. And I just said, we need a moment. I share that because in all of this, we need to make sure that there is a time to be selfish. In a crisis, people are impacted. It manifests in the work we do, it manifests in the processes that are around us, but our reality is that people are most affected during and after a crisis. So while we may have managed all the way through this, got our organizations to a new steady state, and we're looking forward and thinking about the future and what we have to tackle and building that vision and that big picture and charting that course, we have to remember that ourselves and those we lead and support have fatigue. This has been hard. We also have a bit of paralysis. There are moments where we are stuck, and sometimes we don't want to say that. And that paralysis might be around the work. It might be around trying to figure out, as many of you know, we are still having challenges with our unemployment system. And we have thrown everything we could at it and brought in partners and things of that time. And some moments we are just that analysis paralysis. We're in that because we're just thinking. Some nights I go to bed and I saw a cute meme the other day, and it was a picture of a brain, and a person was going to sleep, and they were like, okay, it's sleep time. And in the next picture, it was the brain saying, something like, what are the capitals of all 50 states? Like, it was just crazy, right? It was like, and the woman's eyes were like this big, and she woke back up and she's just laying there and can't sleep. Because there's a reality that right now, for some of us, for many of us, our brains can't shut off. Whether it's work, whether it's home, whether it's worry, whether it's concern, whether it's just taking care of the day to day that looks a little bit different than it did the day before. That fatigue is real. Some of that paralysis comes and goes, but it's also a reality. And there's a big part of this that is about information overload. And that information overload is both a work and a personal. As we start to move back into reopening later today, I have to send out a new round of guidance to make sure state agencies have an understanding of how we map on to going into a modified phase 2, coming out of a phase 5.1 that wasn't a part of phase 1. And with every phase, I send out 2 to 3 pages of guidance of what we're going to do and how that's going to look and how agencies should respond and things they should be thinking about and how you record leave and da 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 da. And everybody is trying to take that in. But you're also trying to figure out how to do your job, and you're trying to keep the day-to-day going. That information overload is real. So I'm going to encourage us, most importantly, as we go back and think about, one, who we are going to be in this moment and how we move from managing to leading and direct that narrative. 2, how we take the preparation and the lessons learned and this crisis and turn it in to a level of readiness. I'm going to push us back to say all of that can only be accomplished with 3, our most valuable asset. So that care of ourselves, of our staff, and the work that they have to do, we have to make sure that we can continue to deliver, that we can lead, but that we can also be in spaces where we have an understanding and we actually have an advantage in some of the work that needs to happen in our agencies because of the industry that we sit in and the expertise that we bring. This is our time to shine. So I'm asking my AT professionals across higher ed, as I am doing with my state, that we lead and that we deliver with courage, with curiosity, and with commitment. That leading with courage means pushing some of the tough and difficult conversations that maybe we never wanted to have before. Do I have legacy systems all over the state? I do. Do I need a different level of investment in those? And have we been saying that? I do. Do I need to raise the fire there? I must. Do I need to increase cybersecurity across our infrastructure? I have to. Do I have all the resources I need to do so? No. Am I going to stop pushing and asking? No. And now was the time, as some would say, well, not now. Let's wait until things settle. Now is the time because I must. So lead and deliver with courage. Don't shy away from those hard things, but also with curiosity. Different ideas and experiences truly enables growth. To be able to adapt and adapt boldly into this new space will be critical. And we will be at the forefront of helping our organizations think about how they do this and leveraging our experiences, our tools, our skill set. Never a better time. And most importantly, with commitment, because staying the course of what we know is needed in our spaces to help our agencies and our organizations be where they need to be, staying that course is hard. But please remember this most valuable asset, us and our teams. We are the greatest asset to helping our state get through And on the other side, maximizing the power of that greatest asset, that will be the game changer for IT, for our organizations, and for our state. With that, I'd love to take some questions.
Thank you, Dr. Burns-Wallace. I do have some questions. This is Melanie, and I'll be reading some of these questions that have been submitted. Excuse me. What's been the hardest challenge of providing accurate and timely information about COVID? What information should universities be pursuing to collect and display in the fall to ensure the safety of our communities?
You know, I think part of it is where I go back to that conversation about the information overload. There's been almost so much information that it's overwhelming that you don't know where to start, right? One of the things, as always, we want to make sure that we are using the most valid sources. And so validating every source. Early on, there were some malware maps that were trying to show kind of the spread of the virus, and it actually was malware so that people would click on a state and it would infect things. And so, you know, making sure whatever resources you use are being validated. And I actually would say triangulated, where you're getting multiple points of data and using it. I think as we think about the fall and think about what types of information, particularly higher ed institutions need to be making sure is available, I think there's, you know, we started to do this in the state. There is information that is more about the public health crisis itself. And then there is information that is about the delivery of services that you provide. And then there is a set of information that is also operational in terms of almost internal to what you need to provide for people to deliver that second bucket. So I think in higher ed, thinking about how do you separate out that information in a consistent way will be important. Being able to provide some high level public health related information that is tied into the state information and given context, and then maybe drills down to your personal environment could be one bucket. The second bucket is really about what you deliver. What are the services? What are the things that students and your environment need to access? And what will those look like? Are there things that'll be impacted? Are there things that you need to track on so that people are seeing movements up and down? And I think if you think about how we deliver services, if you think about how our students and faculties and staff consume services, and take a little bit of that apart, what's internal and operational and types of information that we need to offer from an operational standpoint of kind of business continuity, and then what is kind of front-facing services and things that people need to do their day-to-day job or need to engage with to continue to take their classes or have access to various information. The challenge here is that it'll never be enough and it'll always be too much for some. The trick is, I would focus again on, from an IT standpoint, being fully integrated into the business discussions of how and what our universities are saying in terms of the story, and overlaying how we then can help them demonstrate and show that through those three pockets of data.
Thank
Next
you.
question. Mm-hmm.
A major struggle we had was getting appropriate broadband access for students, staff, and faculty who live in rural areas across Kansas. I made some progress in working with providers across the state, but it was still woefully poor access. What is happening statewide to build the rural broadband capability?
There are a couple of initiatives in that space, and I know our Department of Commerce has actually been very active in doing some of this work, as well as the Department of Transportation. This crisis, again, has helped to highlight the importance of that. And it's one of those spaces where we're looking at, from that larger perspective, are there dollars that are coming in from the federal level that can be leveraged into this? Because we know that this is more of a long-term issue, and it impacts, for you all, like access for your students and faculty. But what we have also seen from the public health crisis is that it has had a tremendous impact on our healthcare and first responders and access to various things and communication. And so what I would say is that this is a high priority. It's one of those things that it's been on the radar. It has been a conversation in a number of task force, I know, over the last few years, but this crisis has helped to truly identify where those gaps are, and taking a number of maybe new partners coming to the table to figure out what could that look like as a statewide initiative, and what type of resources realistically would we need to be able to invest to put a stronger plan together. So I don't have a great answer. What I can tell you is that this has helped to highlight the importance of an issue that people had an awareness of, but maybe didn't quite understand the severity or the depth of the impact or the lack thereof. So I would say stay tuned. There's definitely more to come in this space that must be done, and must be done rather soon, actually. So
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for the keynote. Fantastic message. Your leadership skills jump off the screen. You touched on some of the struggles the state unemployment system, which has been highly criticized in the media, and those who are affected. How do you approach engaging with your team, keeping them motivated and positive, especially when you can't be together physically?
Yeah, that is hard. So I will tell you that first and foremost, I have an amazing team. I know some of them are listening, so that helps. But no, they are amazing across Department of Administration, across IT, across the agency's IT. Like, the one thing that is invaluable, and it's why I said what I said, was that the employees for the state of Kansas are amazing. I know they are at the higher ed institutions as well, because I had an amazing team at KU that supported us and loved them to death, and still lean and reach out to them on a regular basis. But what I will say is that I have pushed our team to just be human, to we start every conversation. I start to jump into things, and I'll stop myself and say, okay, how are you? And I stop and let people answer, not I'm fine, oh, it's okay, it's good, da 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 da. But we have to stop. I'm pushing our leads to do the same. I'm pushing that down and through. We have done the calls, the reach out. I don't want people just sending an email and saying, here's the update, particularly in this virtual environment. I need to know that we are having that human contact, and that's important. The other thing is, with all of our meetings, I made my team, I'm like, yes, we are going to use Teams. It is the tool of choice. We have trained now close to 2,000 state employees on Teams, and we've deployed it all over. And when we were in a meeting, I'm like, turn on your camera. I want to see you. I need to put eyes on you. We need to see each other and have a little bit of connectivity, and just trying to continue to make those personal connections. I think overall, though, there is a reality when you think about the crisis that we've had with the unemployment system and just showing, the kinks in that legacy system. For me, the most important thing is to ensure that I continue to be at the table with the leadership, and that I am supporting the work that that team is doing, that I'm communicating the team's needs as well as their challenges and their triumphs, that team feels supported, that they feel that they are backed up, and that there is regular and continuous communication. I cannot stress enough that continuous communication is critical. Little things like the fact that since I started, I send out for all of my employees a thank you card for their annual anniversary. They're with the state, and so everybody gets a card from me, and it says, thank you so much for your service over time. So on their anniversary date, everybody gets a card. Well, as we started to move into this remote period, I told my HR team, I need you to run me home addresses and send me some labels and we'll make this work. And we have mailed for the months of April and May, and I'm getting ready to mail out June, those cards to every single state employee in both agencies that have had a work anniversary across this period of time. That may seem random, but for me, it's important. One, the acknowledgement of people's work anniversaries and the service that they give, but two, that during this crisis, we're continuing that acknowledgement so that people know when they open it up, that they know that they're still being seen, that they're still being heard, that they're still being supported.
Thank you. To follow along with that, there are some certain people who are currently the sole support for certain technologies. How do you strategically build out support so that these employees can take a break or to allow these employees to get sick or care for the sick?
Yeah, that's hard. But I think it's also one of those where I talk about, where I go back to this idea of opportunities. It's given us an opportunity to better understand just how siloed we might be in one area or another, or how dependent we might be on one piece of technology or one individual to make certain things work. And so this goes back to making some of those tough decisions that need to be made that we may not have approached before. We have to figure out, how do we plan around the ability to give our staff the space and capacity they need, but we also need to plan to understand, how do we diversify that skill set and what does that look like? Some of that might be internal, but some of it might be external as well, in the sense of, how do we get a certain amount of support that gives us a little bit more capacity so that we then have the time to figure out how to make this a more broader support. This also might be looking around to other peers, other agencies, other organizations. This morning, I was just on a call with, it's a group out of Topeka, and it is the basically technology group of CIOs in Topeka, not state government. It's companies, organizations, nonprofits, and state government. And it's a technology group where we come together across Topeka to talk about what we're dealing with. Well, we're all dealing with remote work right now. And there are some things that some of our peers have done, or resources that they have, that I need, and that I need quickly, that in this time, people are willing to share a little bit differently to give us capacity. This goes back to that curiosity, that creativity. How do we come at some of this work a little bit differently? Where do we find backups and support so that we have time to build that capacity? And how do we lead towards the future to say, we can no longer go forward with this being a singular person or a singular point in our operation? This has to be an operation that's able to be a lot more agile and nimble. You're not going to get there overnight. So you have to have both the short term, some immediate, and some long term plans to how you do that. But most immediately is, how do we keep operations moving now and give our individuals support or the time off that they need to take? Because it's not healthy if we can't do that. And again, looking cross agency, cross organization, cross university, external, for a short period of time to grow capacity. But when you begin to do that, you need to then start on that medium and long term to figure out, how do we change this going forward? Does there need to be duplication? Do we need additional training? Is this something we need to think about how we currently do it so that it actually can be spread across a team? Or is this something that at the end of the day might need to get outsourced differently? And this individual moves from doing it on a day-to-day to engagement that looks more of managing pieces of the services and integrating it in a broader way. That works in some pockets and it doesn't work in others. But it's not a clear answer, because the reality is that each situation is going to be different, but we have to figure out that short term, that medium term, and that long term, because once we've identified it, we can no longer allow and simply say, well, we know that and we figured that out, but we couldn't do anything about it. That's unacceptable from a leadership standpoint. Once you know and you've identified it, and this particular crisis is shedding great light on some of those areas, we as leaders have to be responsive enough and take some of those tough decisions to actually get us into a better place for our organizations and for the state.
So how do we advocate for the use of technology to create positive change in higher ed to non-IT during this time in order to bring higher ed to a better place overall?
I think that I don't know that you have to advocate as hard as you had to before, because I think that there's some things that people are just seeing and learning and realizing, wow, I didn't realize that. Or, oh my goodness, I didn't know the level of expertise and resources that we actually already had on hand. I think it is critical that we are in the right places and spaces and conversations, that we're at the leadership tables, at the tables that are setting the strategy and being visionary. So the leaders who are part of this group, like, I need you leaning in and being at those tables, because I don't know that we have to push and advocate as much as, like, in the sense of um, an understanding of the value. I think we have to be there so we're integrated into the strategy, that we're not the afterthought, that the strategy is built as to what's going to happen in the fall. And then they come to IT and say, now, can you do this? And then this point and this point. I think we have to say, if this is the strategy, here are the things we can leverage into different parts of the strategy. And have we thought about this and this and this, because we can do this? A lot of times when we are building vision and strategy coming out of a crisis, we don't know what we don't know. One, about what the future holds, but two, even fully about our current capability. And so this is where I lean in and say that we must lead and deliver courageously, because we also in this space are going to have to put our necks out a little bit further and say, I think we can do this. If you give us a chance or an opportunity, I believe we can deliver this. Let us tackle this business problem and come back to you with some options. Sometimes in some spaces, we get burned when we do that, and have gotten burned in our higher ed environments. But this is a time not to shy away. We have to continue to be bold in these spaces. We have to continue to show our partners on the business side that return on investment, that value proposition that we bring in, and most importantly, the creativity and the innovation that comes with understanding the technology. I always would say the work that we did at KU of, I don't want to come in and start talking about we have X, Y, and Z solution and it does this, 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 and this. I want us to build strategy. I want us to understand where we're going. And then I want to ensure that as we are building that we are leveraging the technology to get us there more efficiently, faster, smart, things of that way. And that's what the IT does. So being at the table, that's going to be critical. Offering solutions and recommendations, understanding and being integrated into that strategy is going to be critical. And fourth, being ready to deliver and try a few things along the way is also going to be very beneficial to our organizations.
Thank you. I think we have time for just a couple more questions.
Okay.
You touched on the new normal and what it looks like for the future. How do we encourage our employees to consider remote work as a part of the new normal after COVID-19?
It's a tough question. Even with the state, we're tackling this. I think there are some that have fully embraced it, and we're going to be hard pressed to get them back into the office. And I think there are others that cannot wait to get back in for the camaraderie, for the space, or that is just a space and place that they like to be. I've enjoyed being at home, but I really like my office as well. I've missed my office and that ability to have a little bit of separation. And so I do think that as we think about going forward, one, I think we're going to be forced into this environment for a little bit longer than people think. So that's one. I don't know that, anything has drastically changed where tomorrow we're going to flip a switch and people should be coming back in mass groves into buildings and places and spaces. So that's first. Secondly, I think we really do need to think about our operations and our staff. Because when we talk about remote work and when I talk about with my team as we start to look forward, I'm encouraging them to think of this as twofold. One is about the actual job function that an individual has, and does that job and their functions actually work in a remote environment. But the second is about the individual. Not every individual is suited for remote work, whether that's based on personality, whether that's based on their own personal needs, whether that's based on work performance. And so it's a combination of both, of making sure that we are having that conversation. I also think it's important as you think about going forward. We did a forced work from home or remote work from our side, and my understanding is that the higher ed
Thank
no
you.
problem. Am I up?
Can you hear me now? D'Angela, can you hear me?
I can.
No.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, a little technical difficulties. That's always fun, right?
No problem.
Okay.
All right. Yep. All right. Tell me when we're ready. All right. So technical difficulties, it always happens, no problem. We were talking about as people start to come back. One of the things that I want to definitely share is what I've asked people to think about as you think about helping your teams move forward with remote work is that we did a forced remote work at the point of when the crisis happened. We had to send everybody home. What I'd encourage us to do is to think about it strategically going forward and having those conversations with the staff so that a staff member knows that it's been thought through as to why we're going to continue to remote work, why their position makes sense, why them as an individual makes sense. So that you go back to, well, how would you have done it if we hadn't been forced into it? You would have a conversation. There would be documentation where everybody understands expectations on both sides. You'd make sure that there are certain things that are in place. We almost have to like take a step back and make sure we do it the right way as we do a continuation of a remote work. The forced remote work moment caused us to say everybody just had to. So for those that might be struggling with it, they may feel like, well, now you're just making us all do it. But you might have to demonstrate that, no, we're still thinking about this strategically. And now we set up structures that will help sustain us for a period going forward and not just in reaction. And we're just forcing everybody to remote work.
Thank you. One final question. Thank you for taking the time today to share your journey. What is the most important skill to move to the next step?
The most important skill to move to the next step. You know, I would say that's hard. Just one. I'm going to cheat and I'm going to say there are two things. One is being self-aware, having an awareness of where you are on your journey, in your trajectory, where your gaps are, where your needs are, how best you work, and then challenging yourself as you move from environment in environment to work on those areas. That also includes being willing to take critical feedback and use that feedback. Because if you are not getting better as an individual, as a teammate, as a leader, you can't keep moving, because at a certain point, you will stop yourself. You'll be your biggest barrier. But with that, communication is also very critical. As you move to the next level, you have to communicate up, out, down, and sideways. Communication skills, the ability to articulate what we do and how we do it, and that value proposition in IT in particular, is fundamental. For people to see our role as a value add at all times, to see us as part of the solutions and journeys and strategies and not the barrier, means you must have a strength in communication as you move from level to level that grows. That is key and critical, because you can deliver everything possible in an IT environment. And if people cannot hear you, if people perceive you as the barrier and not part of the strategy and the solutions, it doesn't matter how effective the IT issues, structures, support, or innovation is. You'll never be a part of the conversation. So that self-awareness and always reflecting and pushing yourself to grow and figure out, what is it that I need? How best do I work? How do I challenge myself differently? How do I fail and how do I recover? How do I take that critical feedback? And at every single step, how do I sharpen my communication skills, verbal, written, interpersonal, body language, face, that goes up, down, sideways, in, at an angle to any and everybody that must consume what we're trying to deliver.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burns-Wallace. We really enjoyed your comments and appreciate the time that you took today. I know how busy you are and with the two agencies that you manage. So I appreciate, again, from ESU and from the Planning Committee, thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you all for having me. I hope you all have a great conference. There's some great topics that are out there. I'm hoping that some of that will be recorded, because there was a couple of things I wanted to try to catch, and I have meetings for the rest of the day. So are they going to be recorded?
Yes, they will be recorded. Your talk this morning was also recorded. When it finishes streaming, we'll have a recording of that. So yes, we'll have recordings of everything. It will be really great.
Wonderful. Enjoy your day. Enjoy this time to get together and learn and grow. And again, take a breath. Take the moment. Take a moment to refresh. Thank you for all the work that you do on behalf of the state, on behalf of your institutions. We could not be where we are today in the middle of this crisis without you. So please know, if it's not said as much as it should be, that leaders across the state have said in many pockets, we couldn't have done this without our IT. Our IT is amazing. Oh my goodness, we didn't even know what we had and how much they've been doing for us, but now we know. So please know that people are aware and they're paying attention. So use this time wisely.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye. Which start at 10:15. If you're going to do those, please be sure and sign up for those ahead of time so you can be admitted into the Zoom room. See you all later.